Hi, Dr. Schultz here. Just wanted to, for those of you that are in the beginning of your career or pre-career, you're thinking about getting a college education, a degree, some type of further education, or if you're in mid-career and you're looking maybe to find a different career field or looking for advantages for promotion, there's always a lot of questions around the value of and how to go about getting a college degree. So let's talk about that a little bit. I'm going to start with um, the certificate. You can go to any of the colleges that we're going to talk about, whether they be public or private or proprietary or religious. We're going to talk about those differences and get a certificate, which is a designation that you have completed a course of study that gives you the essential skills of a particular trade or job. So a certificate, for example, if you go to a police academy that's through a vocational school or a junior college, is the case in many parts of the country, then you get a certificate that you graduated from that particular program. Sometimes, particularly if that certificate is obtained in a junior college or college setting, those can be transferred into college credits. All right, so a credit is the currency of college degrees. So that typically is if we're looking at a traditional class, and of course there are more and more online programs. All of my education was traditional. Not all of my teaching has been traditional. Some of that's been online. But the typical college credit is a 3 credit hours for a course. And if you're taking a 3 credit hour course, that means that over a typical semester of 15 weeks, you have gone to a 50-minute class 3 times during that week. So 3 credit hours equals 15 times 3, 45 clock hours in the classroom. Now, if you have a lab, which is not just typical lecture interaction classroom kind of template for a college class, if you have a lab experience or field experience, you're not going to get the same amount of credit. So it may take many, many more hours to equal 1 lab hour or 1 internship hour. And so you need to check that out. So the total number of hours that you need for a certificate entirely depends on what kind of certification that you're getting, whether it's a welding certificate or a building certificate or a police academy certificate. Those hours will often be regulated or suggested by state licensing boards. For example, in the state of Colorado, you have to have X number of hours of the right curriculum that's dictated by the state in order to complete a basic police academy. That's true with nurses' aides or LPNs or a number of things. So auto mechanics aren't licensed necessarily by most states, but there are professional standards from professional organizations that will dictate how many hours and what the course content and what the competencies are in a certificate. So a certificate program may last 15 weeks, it may last 20 weeks, it may last 2 years. Kind of depends on what the professional standard is to make you a job ready. All right. So again, not all of those hours, and maybe none of them, maybe all of them, are transferable if you want to continue into a college degree program that will end up in a 2-year, 4-year, or graduate or postgraduate program. Okay, with me so far? So as we move up the list, the AAS is an Associate of Applied Science. So that's going to be contrasted with the Associate of Arts in a couple of ways. First of all, the AA is going to have a standard set of coursework that is transferable. In other words, most or all of the hours of an Associate of Arts program, that's a 2-year degree, 60 college credit hours typically, are going to apply towards a bachelor's degree, which is a 4-year degree typically. So if you take 2 years of community college, or if you're in a 4-year college and you work towards an AA within that framework of moving towards a bachelor's degree, then those 2 years of college are a completion if AA is going to be the totality of your academic experience, but it's also 2 years out of a 4-year degree. So it's transferable, and that's really, really critical. Now, I'll talk a little bit right now about transferability of credits. If you go into an academic program, an associate or bachelor's program, you're going to have to take the same basic core competency general studies set of classes. So that's going to be English, history, math, science, some other things that everybody who has a 2-year academic degree from an accredited college, they're going to be taking the same set of courses. There are some electives. In other words, some courses you have to take, some courses you can take just because you're interested in them, and some courses you have to choose from a certain set of courses. So, for example, if there's a sociology requirement, you might be able to take juvenile justice or criminology or sociology or psychology. So that program is going to be prescribed for you, the AA program, and it's going to be transferable if you are in an accredited school. Now, again, back to transferability. If you're going into that program and you've got to take a math course, which you will, whatever level of math that happens to be, and you're not ready for that math course, so you have to take kind of a catch-up course, a remediation course, a course that reteaches you what you should have learned in high school, and you'll be tested as you enroll for these college courses. They'll test you to make sure that you're ready for college work. If you're not ready for college work in a particular class, then you've got to do some remediation. So that will mean that you take typically a course that's for college credit will be English 101, for example. If you're not ready for English 101, you might take an English 099 course. So sometimes students get hung up because they don't realize that that 099 preparation course, remedial course, catch-up course, which is great because you'll need those skills to go on to take the mandatory class, but those 099 level courses don't count towards graduation. So you may be paying for those out of your financial aid, which is going to diminish your total ability to get financial aid or add to potential student debt. And by the way, you can get through college without student debt. Talk to Dave Ramsey about that. But it's very important that you understand that those remedial courses aren't going to count. And many students, particularly from areas where there's a less than top-notch high school, secondary education, many students have to take as much as a year or even 2 to get them up to speed so that they can compete and succeed in college courses. So it's very possible that you could be in college, could be on a college campus and engaged and enrolled in college classes for 3 years and only get a 2-year degree because that first year is catching up from the stuff that you failed to learn or weren't properly taught in your secondary school. So now the contrast between an AA and an AAS is that the AAS is an Associate of Applied Science, so it does not include all the mandatory general education courses that an AA does, which means that an AAS may not be transferable, typically will not be transferable to a 4-year degree program. So in my state of Colorado, for example, criminal justice can be considered a vocation because it's vocationally licensed and it can be taught by vocational teachers. In other words, for people to teach in a police academy, which can result in college credit, they have to have vocational competency, which means 10,000 hours of experience. They don't necessarily have to have any higher education at all. And so those certificate credits may be transferable only into an AAS as a bunch of electives or something else, and do not count for the general studies, the general education basic requirement that all bachelor's degree candidates have to have. So if you have an AAS, that's great, but an AAS is designed to be what's called a terminal degree. In other words, that's all the higher education that you intend to get, and that's why it's an applied science. Now, there are occasionally programs that you can find that are Bachelor of Applied Sciences, and that again is more of a vocational degree and not an academic degree, and you may be able to transfer an AAS to a BAS. But again, that's not as academically pure and doesn't carry the same weight in terms of academic preparation as a bachelor's degree would. So certificate, AS, AA, this is kind of a rare creature. But then you get to the bachelor's degrees. So either a BA, which is a Bachelor of Arts, or a BS, which is a Bachelor of Science. And typically the BA will have language, where a BS may not. That's a foreign language. And it's more of a liberal arts type degree. Frankly, it's not going to make a lick of difference to people who are looking at your resume, whether you have a BA or a BS. In criminal justice, it's typically going to be a Bachelor of Science. So that's a 4-year degree, which means 124 credit hours in most places. And again, those are 124 credit hours as prescribed by that particular program. When you declare a major, I don't really have a slide for that, but when you, let's see if I can do this without looking like a first grader. No, apparently not. What we talk about when we mean a major is what area of competence do you want to have? Because a bachelor's degree means that you have a solid foundation in a particular field. So if your interest is in criminal justice, then you would major in criminal justice. If you want to have a little bit broader background, or you have a different path that you want to go in your master's degree that is going to be put on top of your bachelor's degree, then you might want to have a psychology major or a sociology major. Or if you want to do something that's really going to make you valuable, and I don't want to put down criminal justice degrees because that's what my bachelor's is, but you might want to think about computer science or language or business or human relations or personnel management. You might want to do something that's going to get you prepared not for the patrol officer experience, but for the administrative experience when you're going to be dealing with budgets and health insurance and scheduling and finances and all those kinds of things. Accounting. If you're going to go into federal employment, I'm going to recommend that you get one of those non-criminal justice degrees. If you get an accounting degree or a business degree or a language proficiency in another language, those are going to be highly sought after, maybe more so than the criminal justice degree. Because here's a little insight. Frankly, most of the things that you're going to learn about in a criminal justice program are going to be things that are going to be taught in the field, in the academy, in field training, in service training anyway. I'm not trying to devalue the criminal justice degree, but I want you to open your eyes and think about maybe we could go in a direction that would truly add a unique facet to my education that criminal justice may or may not. I would also encourage you to do an internship, regardless of whatever program that you're in, which is some field work that is kind of uniquely constructed. My internship in my bachelor's degree program was that I did a study of rural law enforcement. So I was a city police officer at the time that I was finishing my bachelor's, And I rode with the Sheriff's Department and noted the contrast and did some research about the history of sheriff's offices compared to municipal policing. So that was my internship. I also did not have a minor in my particular program. And the minor is, okay, you're doing a major, but what else are you interested? You might want to have a music minor. You might want to have a business minor. I was actually going to be an accounting minor with my criminal justice major, but couldn't really successfully complete my accounting class. So I went with what's known as a functional major, which means that you don't have a minor and you just add on more classes that are electives within your designated field. So there's the major, the minor, the functional minor, and the internship. The other thing that we want to be aware of is if you're really going to shoot for some post bachelor work, and here's all of this is considered undergraduate. This is considered graduate, and this is considered postgraduate. Okay, so those terms are something that you'll hear. So if you're going to be looking at graduate work, let's say I really would like to be a psychologist, then don't major in criminal justice, major in psychology, because when you get to your master's in psychology, and you'll probably want to go on for a doctorate, but there are some good graduate and master's levels psychology or social work things that can be very helpful and provide a good career for you. But if I'm a criminal justice major and I've got my bachelor's in criminal justice, even with a minor in psychology, and then I decide to get a master's in psychology or master's in social work, there's a lot of graduate classes that have prerequisites of undergraduate classes. So you may have your 124 hours of your degree, then you're going to go to your master's, which is from 30 to 60 to 90 hours, depending on the program. But some of those hours in a master's program are going to require that you have taken a prep course in that. So if you have a 60-hour master's degree program, many of those classes might require that you take some catch-up classes as prerequisites so that you have a good foundation, so you may end up spending a lot more time in college than if you had prepared for that. So if you're gonna get a master's or a PhD in psychology, do a psychology major so that you can be prepared to take those further studies, because it builds on one another. And again, the difference between an MA and an MS, Master of Arts versus Master of Science, is just how much humanities and foreign language that you have with the MA. Now, my particular course is I was interested in public administration. I was interested in becoming a police chief. So I took a master's in public safety administration, which was kind of a how to be a police chief. Now, it's very possible that if I had just taken a degree in public administration, that would have probably been a broader degree, and that particular master's was kind of unique to the University of Central Missouri, which is where I got my master's. And so it was kind of a specialty program that was not super mainstream. It was accredited and legitimate, but you just want to be aware of what the marketability is, what it's going to look like on your resume. And I'll say a word about teaching here. We talked about the certificate program and the AAS. Since these are not strictly speaking academic, non-degreed people can sometimes teach in that. So you can be a criminal justice teacher in a 2-year program if it's a vocational program without a degree. If you want to teach in traditional academic classes, whether it's online or in a traditional classroom, you're going to probably have to have at least a master's degree. And more of those master's degrees, since they're so the proliferation of online courses, a lot of people have master's degrees. So when I got my master's back in the early 80s, It was kind of unusual for a police officer to have a master's degree, particularly in a semi-rural area where I have worked. And so that master's carried a lot of weight, and it got me through all of my teaching career. In fact, I didn't get my doctorate until actually I was no longer teaching full-time in a college. So for 17 years I taught with a master's, and it was like a lot of value out of that. But I was always teaching criminal justice courses, and so I had to make sure that my master's program included enough hours, enough of a load of criminal justice rather than management, because I was teaching criminal justice, that I had to have a good base of knowledge for teaching criminal justice within my master's program. So I'd have probably been maybe better off with just a criminal justice master's in order to teach, but I also knew that I wanted to be in administration, so I wanted something that was a hybrid. So that degree worked very well for me, but you really need to think ahead and see what kind of direction you want to go, and how people are going to interpret your resume and how important that is. So there's another degree that's kind of snuck in here that a lot of people don't get, and it's probably because it's mostly for people in the education field, but in between the master's and the doctorate is a specialist degree, which is postgraduate, right? This is undergraduate, this is graduate, which is a postgraduate course of study that's a specialist degree. And again, within education, it means a lot. Outside of education, people really don't know what it is. It's kind of a strange creature. But a lot of people who are interested in being a principal or a superintendent will have a specialist degree kind of on their way to a PhD. If somebody knows that they're going to get a doctorate, then the specialist may or may not be a way station that people want to deal with. So now there are lots of doctoral degrees. The most common is PhD. I don't have a PhD, even though I'm Dr. Shults. I have an EDD, which is an education doctorate, and there are some others. For example, in ministry, you can get a DMin, which is doctorate in ministry, and some of the differences is a PhD traditionally requires a foreign language competence, and requires research, as all of these do, and so it's very academic. Now, in the past, the EDD was considered more of a vocational competency, practical kind of degree. And so with a PhD, you do a formal research dissertation, and with an EDD, you do a project that showed your competence. Now, right now, the DMin, for those of you that might be interested in ministry, again, that'll make you a doctor, but it's not super academic. And I don't want to denigrate, but it's more for practicality. And so instead of a research per se, instead of a dissertation, you'll be doing a ministry project, and both of them are very highly valuable. But again, if you want to teach in a religious program or a seminary or a Christian college, and you're going to teach theology, you'd probably want a PhD rather than a DMin. And the distinction between a PhD and an EDD is almost completely gone now. And so it used to be that the EDD would have to look up to the PhD, and that's not true as much as it had been in the past. I did a full-blown research dissertation. The only thing that I didn't have that a PhD might have required is foreign language competence. So that's kind of the gamut. There are some other degrees in there, obviously, a law degree, BSN for nurses, Bachelor of Science in Nursing. So there's a lot of different specialties, but this is just kind of the core of basically what the degree progression is. And if you have any questions, please message me or leave a note there if you have a comment. One of the other things, or another set of information that I really want to have people understand when they're looking at education options is the kinds of colleges that you have. Not all colleges are created equal. So first of all, I want to talk about our traditional state colleges. So I didn't know where my cursor was. The state colleges, and those are colleges that are government operated and are accredited by a national or regional accreditation agency. So I start out with state because I want you to see, I want you to look when you get to the website of whatever college or university. And by the way, the difference between a college and a university is the university has graduate programs. Colleges typically have only up to undergraduate programs. So a state college or university will have an accreditation, which means that there's a stamp of approval that they have gone through a process that assures that their instructors are competent, that their outcomes are good, and that their content is up to snuff. And so it's very important that you have an accredited state college. Now, these other colleges that we see may or may not be accredited. So you want to do the research and find out what the accreditation is of your state colleges. And you can pick any state college in your area or in the country, and they'll be accredited by North Central or some other regional accreditation. So you want to make sure and see what that accreditation is, because you want to make sure that all of these schools up here also are accredited. Now, if you do all of your education within a college that is not accredited, then you'll be okay in terms of getting your degree, but you may not be able to teach with a degree from a non-accredited institution. You won't be able to transfer possibly credits from a non-accredited institution. And so it's really important that you have an accreditation. Now, all of these schools up here, proprietary, trade, private, religious, all of those schools will claim that they have accreditation, but it will be accreditation from some organization. So I could just start up a website and say the Crown Jewel accreditation process, and then say my private college is accredited by the Crown Jewel accreditation team. Well, that's meaningless. It doesn't mean anything. So it's really important that you look at that. And if you choose to go to a school that's not accredited, that's fine. Just know what limitations there are to that. So when we talk about a proprietary school, we're talking about a college that is for profit. They are there for the purpose of making money. They typically charge a lot. They often have courses that train people for stuff they really don't need to be trained for. And not all proprietary schools are bad. I don't want to say that. But they're there for profit. And they are often there to take advantage of federal student loan and grant programs. Now, I know this because my first full-time teaching job was with a proprietary college. It was a for-profit college. And we had a criminal justice program that really just provided a certificate that made you eligible to be a security guard. And as most of you know, for most typical security guard positions, you don't need any certification unless the state requires some, and then usually the company does it. So just be cautious that you have an accredited college, and shop around. If you see that a proprietary school has thousands of dollars in tuition greater than another option, community college, for example, which is typically the least expensive because it's more fully tax supported and designed to educate community members, then that's one thing to be concerned about. They also have to disclose their rates of employment, that is the success of their graduates, the rates of completion. Now, some of the loopholes have been tightened a little bit because of the abuses of some proprietary colleges. But there was a time when some of these schools would go out to probation parole offices, to unemployment lines, to homeless people, and say, hey, if you'll sign up and stay in long enough to get your first check, then you get to keep that money and you don't have to go to school anymore. And it really was dishonest and has resulted in some additional regulation and some shutdown of some proprietary schools. So ask the question, is this a state funded, is this a tax supported school, is it accredited, what are your placements rates, and some other good consumer questions. And if you find out that they meet your needs, then that's great. Now, there are also trade schools, which are typically proprietary, although there are some that are state operated. And those schools, again, are not going to give you the academic foundation to continue to undergraduate, graduate, postgraduate education. But they might get you certified as a welder, get you certified as a plumber, get you certified as an electrician, or a power line person. And a lot of these professions are paying more than you'd make as an entry-level police officer. So I don't disregard those things. In criminal justice, however, unless you just want to do it for yourself, trade school is probably not something that's going to be on your purview. Private colleges are colleges that include religious colleges. I taught at a private Christian college that was accredited. Some private colleges are secular. They're not religiously affiliated. Higher education in this country mostly came out of schools that were originally church-related schools. And so these are some private and religious schools are typically much more expensive. But again, if that's the environment that you want to participate in, then that's great. Now, we talked about accreditation. Let's talk about the difference between online and traditional classrooms. Obviously, the access to higher education that is presented by online availability. And yeah, you sit at your computer, you engage with emails, you engage with the material, you occasionally have classes like this where the professor's lecturing based on a video. Sometimes you have something like Zoom or some of these video conference kinds of things. I've got to tell you, if you have the opportunity to go to a traditional butts in the seat classroom, I just feel like you get so much more than just the material from interaction with students, access to professors, than you do with an online college. However, if access and schedule is limiting to you, which it is for most of us, particularly if you're working, and I know I would work a midnight shift, go to class during the day, work my second job, and then go without sleep for a long time when I was a young police officer working on my degrees. I got an AA first, then got into law enforcement, slogged through my bachelor's while I was working, slogged through my master's while I was working, and I slogged through my doctorate program while I was working full-time as well. So it's certainly doable, but the online thing, I can't, I'm not condemning it, and I certainly understand the availability and the advantage of it. So absolutely take advantage of that if you can. But again, be careful about accreditation. I would recommend that if you do an online program, that you do it through a state university, because your degree is going to look the same. See, so if you go through Colorado Technical University or the University of Phoenix or some of these other proprietary private college programs, your employer is going to know that it was an online program. Now, to be persistent and self-disciplined to succeed in an online program tells me something about an applicant. And certainly absorbing the material and getting access to the material and taking advantage of adjunct professors like me. I'm teaching for Eastern Wyoming College. And they've got, I'll never meet these students in person, but they've got complete access to me if they want to text me or call me or get in a video conference. They certainly can, and so we have ways to communicate with each other and interact in class. But you cannot replace eyeball, face-to-face conversations in real time. But that's becoming less and less prevalent. Even in secondary education, there's a lot of online training. So we know about that. We've talked about this transferability issue and that what the number of hours are. The one thing that we didn't talk about that I'll mention is that some colleges will give you some credit for life experience. So for example, if you have a degree program that has an internship, when I worked at a Christian college, if somebody had been a police officer for X number of years, I'm going to say, well, then you've done essentially an internship, which was 15 credit hours, which is a pretty good chunk out of a 64-hour degree program. We'll just sign you up, have you pay for the credit, and give you credit for life experience. Now, we want to be careful that we don't want to dilute our degree program. So that's going to have some limitations. I can't just, because you've been a cop for 20 years, I can't give you a criminal justice degree or give you credit for every criminal justice class that there is, because you probably already know the stuff. But do ask that question on your program if there's any credit for life experience, because that can be legit and slow down your, or speed up rather, your degree completion process. Be aware again of transferability if you're going to swap colleges. For example, somebody, when I was teaching at the four-year Christian school, somebody would come in with hours and they'd gotten, a 2-year degree from here, and then they get some online courses here and some butts and seat courses here, and they've got 45 credit hours or 50 credit hours, and they only lack 3 or 4 classes to get a degree. So they want to come and say, okay, I'm gonna put all these together, and if they're the equivalent of what you have in your program, then I just need to put these on my transcript, which is the record of classes that you've taken, and then take another 12 credit hours, and I'll have a bachelor's degree from ABC College. No, the college is not going to do that, because if they don't have a significant amount of the program hours coming from their institution, they really can't guarantee that it's going to have the stamp or the imprimatur of a particular college. So for example, at Hannibal LaGrange University, where I taught, it was a Christian college associated with the Southern Baptist Convention. They would limit the number of transferable hours if, and I can't remember exactly what the number was, but if there was like 3/4 of your hours came from somebody besides Hannibal LaGrange, they don't want to give you a degree from Hannibal LaGrange, since most of your credit hours are from some other college or some other collection of colleges. So again, one of those things you want to work very carefully with, particularly if you have a butts and seats, a traditional college, or even if you have a traditional college that's offering an online program. You want to sit down with their financial aid people. You want to sit down with the advisor in your area. You want to look at the outline of classes that you have to take. You want to look at how long you have to take those. So if you take Intro to Criminal Justice in 2020 and you kind of gets around to 2035 and you're getting your next Criminal Justice 102 class, the material may have changed so much that they discount the first one. So you want to know where you're going, what it's going to cost, um, what your major and your classes are going to be, what's going to be the outcome, how long it's going to take, what's your resume going to look like, what value it's going to be to your career, and all those kinds of things. So I've worked with young students and midlife career change students all of my life, and I've been that. I've been a working student and in both for graduate, undergraduate, and postgraduate work. So I am happy to work with you if you have some other questions. So appreciate your patience in going through that. I hope that answered some of your questions. If you have any additional issues, please send me a message or note it on the Facebook page here under this presentation, and we'll get them answered for you. Thanks for joining us.